The elevator doors were sliding shut when Maya felt the fabric of her blazer twist in someone's desperate grip. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she turned to face Detective Linda Morrison, whose usually composed demeanor had cracked like ice under pressure. The woman's fingers clutched Maya's shirt with trembling intensity, her voice breaking as she whispered the words that would change everything. "Don't you dare walk away from this. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Maya Chen had spent 3 years building her reputation as Portland's most trusted investigative journalist. At 29, she had exposed corrupt city officials, unraveled corporate scandals, and given voice to the voiceless. But nothing had prepared her for the story that would land on her desk that Tuesday morning, wrapped in a manila envelope, and sealed with the kind of desperation that only comes from someone who has nowhere else to turn. The envelope contained a single photograph and a handwritten note. The image showed a young girl, maybe 8 years old, standing beside a man in an expensive suit outside the Cascade Children's Foundation. The note, written in shaky handwriting, simply read, "They said she was adopted. She wasn't. Find the truth. Lives depend on it." Maya stared at the photograph for what felt like hours, studying every detail. The little girl's eyes held a sadness that seemed too deep for someone so young. The man beside her wore a practiced smile, the kind politicians perfect in mirrors. Something about the scene felt staged, artificial, like a performance put on for the camera. She reached for her laptop and began what she did best, digging for the truth. The Cascade Children's Foundation appeared legitimate on the surface. Their website showed smiling children, grateful families, and glowing testimonials about successful adoptions. The man in the photograph was identified as Dr. Richard Blackwood, the foundation's director and a respected figure in Portland's philanthropic circles. But Maya had learned long ago that the most dangerous lies often wore the prettiest masks. Her first call went to her contact at the Department of Human Services, a social worker named Janet Torres, who had helped her with previous investigations. Janet's voice carried an unusual tension when Maya mentioned the Cascade Foundation. "Maya, I can't talk about this over the phone," Janet whispered. "Meet me at the coffee shop on Pine Street in an hour. Come alone, and make sure you're not followed." The coffee shop buzzed with the usual afternoon crowd, but Janet chose a corner table far from the windows. Her hands shook as she stirred sugar into her coffee, and dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept in days. "I've been waiting for someone like you to show up," Janet began, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise. "I've been trying to piece this together for months, but every time I get close, doors slam shut. Files disappear. Witnesses suddenly change their stories." She slid a folder across the table, glancing nervously around the room. "These are copies of adoption records I managed to save before they were purged from the system. Look at the dates, Maya. Look at the patterns." Maya opened the folder and felt her blood chill. Page after page showed children who had supposedly been adopted through the Cascade Foundation. But the documentation was inconsistent. Ages didn't match. Birth certificates contained discrepancies. Most disturbing of all, several children appeared in multiple records with different names and different supposed birth dates. "Janet, what are you telling me?" "I'm telling you that I think the Cascade Foundation isn't placing children in loving homes." Janet's voice cracked. "I think they're selling them." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire neither woman wanted to acknowledge. Maya's journalistic instincts kicked into overdrive, but alongside her professional excitement came a wave of nausea. If Janet was right, they weren't just looking at fraud. They were looking at human trafficking on a scale that could destroy dozens of lives. "I need names," Maya said, pulling out her notebook. "I need witnesses, victims, anyone who can corroborate this." Janet reached into her purse and pulled out a second envelope. "There's a woman named Patricia Valdez. Her daughter Sophia disappeared from the foster system 3 years ago. The official story was that Sophia was adopted by a family in California, but Patricia never believed it. She's been searching ever since." Maya took down Patricia's contact information, her mind already racing with the next steps of her investigation. But as she prepared to leave, Janet grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Maya, you need to understand something, Doctor. Blackwood has connections everywhere. The mayor's office, the police department, even the FBI. People who've tried to expose him before have found themselves discredited, fired, or worse. Promise me you'll be careful. That evening, Maya sat in her apartment overlooking the Willamette River, spreading the documents across her dining table like pieces of a massive puzzle. Her cat Fitzgerald watched from his perch on the windowsill as she worked late into the night, connecting dots and building timelines. The pattern that emerged was both sophisticated and horrifying. The Cascade Foundation appeared to target vulnerable children from the foster system. Kids with minimal family connections, troubled backgrounds, or behavioral issues that made them difficult to place. These children would disappear into the Foundation's care, ostensibly for evaluation and preparation for adoption. But according to Janet's records, many of them never emerged on the other side. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll find yourself buried." Her hands trembled as she read the message. In 3 years of investigative journalism, she had received her share of threats. But something about this one felt different. More immediate. More personal. She double-checked the locks on her doors and windows, then called her editor, David Kim, at home. David had been her mentor since she joined the Portland Tribune, and his calm voice provided an anchor in the storm of fear and uncertainty. Maya slowed down. David said after she had rapidly explained the situation, "These are serious allegations. We need ironclad proof before we can even consider publishing something like this." "I know, David. But Janet was terrified, and now someone's threatening me. What if we're already too late to save some of these kids?" David was quiet for a long moment. "I'll assign Marcus to work with you on this. You need backup, and Marcus has experience with trafficking cases. But Maya, promise me you won't do anything reckless. If this story is as big as you think it is, we need to be methodical." The next morning, Maya met Patricia Valdez at a small diner in southeast Portland. Patricia was a slight woman in her 40s, with graying hair and eyes that held a mother's unmistakable pain. She clutched a worn photograph of a smiling girl with dark curls and bright eyes. "Sophia was only 9 when they took her," Patricia began, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "She'd been in foster care for 2 years after her father died. I was working 3 jobs, trying to get stable enough to bring her home. The caseworker said the Cascade Foundation could provide her with opportunities I never could." Patricia's story unfolded like a nightmare dressed as a fairy tale. The foundation had promised Sophia would be placed with a wealthy family who could provide her with the best education, health care, and opportunities. Patricia was told she could visit once Sophia was settled, maybe even maintain contact if the adoptive family agreed. But when I called a month later, they said Sophia had already been placed, and the family wanted a clean break, no contact with biological family. They wouldn't even tell me what state she was in. Patricia had spent her life savings hiring private investigators, traveling to different cities following false leads, and begging government agencies for help. Each door that slammed in her face only strengthened her conviction that something terrible had happened to her daughter. "I know she's still out there," Patricia whispered, gripping Maya's hand across the table. "I can feel it in my heart. But I'm just one person. Nobody listens to me. You have a platform, Maya. You can make people listen." That afternoon, Maya and Marcus Rivera, her new partner on the investigation, set up surveillance outside the Cascade Foundation's headquarters. The building was an elegant, converted mansion in Portland's affluent Pearl District, its ivy-covered walls and manicured gardens projecting an image of old-world respectability. Marcus had worked trafficking cases for the FBI before joining the Tribune, and his experience showed in the methodical way he approached the investigation. While Maya focused on the paper trail, Marcus used his contacts to gather intelligence on Dr. Blackwood and his associates. "Blackwood's clean on paper," Marcus reported as they sat in his car across from the foundation. "Harvard-educated, published researcher, serves on half a dozen charity boards. But here's what's interesting. His financial records show income that doesn't match his salary or his investment portfolio." They watched as expensive cars pulled up to the foundation throughout the day. Well-dressed couples emerged, spoke briefly with staff members, then disappeared inside for what appeared to be private meetings. Maya photographed license plates and noted arrival and departure times, building a database of potential clients. On the third day of surveillance, something unusual happened. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the rear entrance of the building. Two men in suits emerged, followed by what appeared to be three young children. The children walked slowly, their heads down, holding hands in a chain that spoke of fear rather than friendship. Maya's blood ran cold as she snapped photographs through her telephoto lens. One of the children looked remarkably similar to Sofia Valdez, though she couldn't be certain from that distance. Before she could get a clearer view, the group had disappeared through a side entrance she hadn't noticed before. "Marcus, we need to find out what's happening in that building," Maya said, her voice tight with urgency. "I'm already on it," Marcus replied, making notes in his surveillance log. "I have a contact in building permits. I'll see if I can get the architectural plans, find out about any recent renovations or hidden spaces." That evening, Maya received a second threatening message, this time left under her apartment door. The note was brief but chilling. "Last warning, some stories aren't worth dying for." She called Detective Morrison immediately. Linda had been a source on several previous stories, and Maya trusted her judgment. But when Linda arrived at Maya's apartment an hour later, her usual professional demeanor had been replaced by barely contained panic. "Maya, you need to drop this story," Linda said without preamble. "I've been getting pressure from upstairs to stay away from anything related to the Cascade Foundation. When I pushed back, I was told in no uncertain terms that my career would be over if I didn't comply." "Linda, we're talking about children. If there's even a chance that kids are being trafficked. You think I don't know that?" Linda's voice cracked with frustration. "I became a cop to protect people, especially kids. But Maya, there are forces at work here that are bigger than both of us. Blackwood has protection at levels I can't even reach." Maya studied her friend's face, seeing the conflict between Linda's professional duty and her personal safety. "What aren't you telling me?" Linda looked around the apartment nervously, then moved to the window and closed the blinds. 6 months ago, another detective started looking into complaints about the Cascade Foundation. Detective Tom Walsh. He was young, ambitious, wanted to make a difference. What happened to him? Officially? He was transferred to a desk job in evidence storage after an internal affairs investigation found discrepancies in his case files. Unofficially? Tom told me he was being framed, that evidence was being planted to discredit him. He left the force rather than fight it. Linda moved closer to Maya, her voice dropping to a whisper. But before Tom left, he gave me something. A flash drive with copies of files he'd gathered. Security footage from buildings near the foundation. Financial records. Names and addresses of people connected to Blackwood's operation. She pulled a small USB drive from her jacket pocket and pressed it into Maya's palm. "I've been carrying this around for months, too scared to look at it, too scared to throw it away. But seeing you risk everything to expose the truth, I can't keep hiding." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Maya stared at the drive, feeling its weight far exceeded its physical mass. "Linda, why didn't you just leak this anonymously? Send it to the press yourself?" "Because I'm a coward," Linda said simply. "Because I have a pension to protect and a daughter in college. But you're different, Maya. You're brave enough to see this through, and you have the skills to tell the story properly. I just pray I haven't waited too long." As Linda prepared to leave, she turned back with one final warning. "Maya, once you look at what's on that drive, there's no going back. They'll know someone has the information, and they'll come after whoever has it with everything they've got. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Maya thought about Sofia Valdez and all the other children whose faces haunted the documents she'd been studying. She thought about Patricia's tears and Janet's fear. She thought about the promise she'd made to herself when she became a journalist, to speak for those who couldn't speak for themselves. "I'm ready," she said. After Linda left, Maya inserted the flash drive into her laptop. What she found there exceeded her worst fears. The drive contained hundreds of files documenting a sophisticated trafficking operation that used the Cascade Foundation as a front. Children were being sold to wealthy clients around the world, their identities erased and their histories rewritten. But the most shocking revelation came in a series of encrypted financial records that showed payments flowing not just to Blackwood, but to city officials, police commanders, and federal agents. The corruption reached into every level of law enforcement and government that should have been protecting these children. Maya worked through the night, cross-referencing names and dates, building a comprehensive picture of the conspiracy. By dawn, she had identified at least 30 children who had disappeared through the foundation over the past 5 years, including Sofia Valdez. As the sun rose over Portland, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She encrypted copies of all her evidence and sent them to secure servers in 3 different countries. Then she called David and Marcus, asking them to meet her at the Tribune offices immediately. But as Maya prepared to leave her apartment, she heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Heavy, measured steps that stopped directly in front of her door. A soft knock echoed through the silence, followed by a voice she didn't recognize. "Ms. Chen? We'd like to speak with you." Maya's pulse hammered as she looked through the peephole. 2 men in dark suits stood in the hallway, their faces impassive, but their posture suggesting they weren't accustomed to taking no for an answer. She grabbed her laptop bag, stuffed the evidence files inside, and moved toward the fire escape. But as she reached the window, she saw more men positioned in the alley below. They weren't even trying to hide their presence. This was meant to be intimidating. The knocking at her door became more insistent. "Miss Chen, we know you're in there. This doesn't have to be difficult." Maya's mind raced through her options. Her phone showed no signal. They were jamming communications. The fire escape was blocked. The front door was the only way out, and they controlled that too. But then she remembered something Linda had mentioned during their previous conversations. The building's basement connected to the old steam tunnels that ran beneath downtown Portland. If she could reach the basement, she might be able to escape through the tunnel system. Moving as quietly as possible, Maya opened her apartment door and peered into the hallway. The men were focused on the elevator, apparently expecting her to come that way. She slipped out and headed for the stairwell at the opposite end of the hall. The stairs creaked under her feet as she descended, each sound seeming to echo like gunshots in the confined space. She reached the basement level and found the maintenance door Linda had described. It was locked, but Maya had learned to pick simple locks during a previous investigation into slumlords who changed locks to keep tenants out. The tunnel system was dark and damp, filled with pipes and cables that created a maze of obstacles. Maya used her phone's flashlight to navigate, moving as quickly as she dared toward what she hoped was the tunnel that would emerge near the Tribune building. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, Maya found a ladder leading up to a street-level grate. She emerged in an alley 3 blocks from her apartment, gasping in the fresh air and shaking from adrenaline and fear. Her phone had regained signal, and it immediately buzzed with missed calls and messages. David, Marcus, even Patricia Valdez had been trying to reach her, but the most urgent message came from Janet Torres. "They arrested Drive, Blackwood, this morning, but he's already been released on bail. Someone very powerful is protecting him. Be careful." Maya made her way to the Tribune building, constantly looking over her shoulder for signs of pursuit. The newsroom was already buzzing with activity when she arrived, but David pulled her into his office immediately. "Maya, thank God," David said, relief evident in his voice. "We heard about Blackwood's arrest and release. Marcus has been trying to reach you for hours." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Maya, we have a problem. The FBI raided your apartment an hour ago. They claim to be investigating security threats related to your recent articles. They took everything, your computer, your files, even your personal documents." Maya sank into a chair, feeling the weight of the situation settling over her like a suffocating blanket. "David, they're trying to bury this story. The evidence I gathered, the connections I made, they want it all to disappear." But then she remembered the encrypted files she'd sent to secure servers. A smile spread across her face as she realized her precaution might have saved everything. "They can take my equipment," Maya said, pulling out her phone. "But they can't take the truth." Over the next 6 hours, Maya, David, and Marcus worked feverishly to reconstruct the investigation from the backup files. They contacted Patricia Valdez, Janet Torres, and Detective Morrison, asking them to go on the record with their experiences. Most importantly, they reached out to Tom Walsh, the detective who had been forced off the case months earlier. Tom agreed to meet them at a safe location, a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city. When he arrived, Maya was shocked to see how much the investigation had aged him. The man looked haunted, jumping at every sound and constantly checking the windows for signs of surveillance. "I've been living in hell for 6 months," Tom began, his hands shaking as he lit a cigarette. "They destroyed my career, my reputation, my marriage, all because I asked too many questions about missing kids." But Tom had kept copies of his evidence, hidden in a storage unit across town. Financial records, surveillance footage, and, most importantly, testimony from a former Cascade Foundation employee who had witnessed children being prepared for special adoptions that bore no resemblance to legitimate placements. "Her name is Rebecca Martinez," Tom said. "She worked as an intake coordinator for 2 years before her conscience got the better of her. She tried to report what she saw, but Dr. Blackwood had her fired and blacklisted from social work. She's been too scared to come forward since then, but maybe if she knows other people are finally listening." Maya felt a surge of hope. Rebecca Martinez might be the key witness they needed to break the case wide open. But as she prepared to contact Rebecca, her phone rang with a call that would change everything. The caller ID showed Linda Morrison's number, but the voice that answered wasn't Linda's. "Miss Chin," the unfamiliar voice said, "Detective Morrison has had an accident. A very unfortunate accident. She's in intensive care at Portland General Hospital, and the doctors aren't sure if she'll survive." Maya's blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" "A friend. Someone who wants to help you understand that some stories come with a price that's too high to pay." Detective Morrison understood that, eventually. "The question is, do you?" The line went dead. Maya, David, and Marcus raced to Portland General Hospital. But when they arrived, they found Linda Morrison's room, surrounded by police officers who claimed to be providing protection. The officers wouldn't let them see Linda, citing hospital policy and ongoing investigation concerns. A nurse who recognized Maya from previous stories whispered that Linda had been found unconscious in her car after what appeared to be a single-vehicle accident. But the nurse also mentioned something that didn't appear in the official report. Linda's car had shown signs of having been forced off the road by another vehicle. Standing in the hospital corridor, Maya felt the full weight of what she was up against. These people had already tried to destroy Tom Walsh's career. They had intimidated Janet Torres into silence, and now they had nearly killed Linda Morrison. The message was clear. Anyone who threatened their operation would be eliminated. But as Maya stood there, wrestling with fear and doubt, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Patricia Valdez, her eyes red from crying but her expression determined. "I heard about Detective Morrison on the news," Patricia said. "Maya, I know you're scared. I know this is dangerous. But my daughter is still out there, and she's counting on people like you to find her." Patricia's words cut through Maya's fear like a knife through fog. This wasn't just about Maya's career or her safety anymore. Children's lives hung in the balance, and she was perhaps the only person in a position to save them. "Patricia, I need you to help me contact Rebecca Martinez," Maya said. "If we can get her to testify, we might have enough to expose this whole operation." Patricia nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." The meeting with Rebecca Martinez took place in the most unlikely of locations, a children's playground in a quiet suburban park. Rebecca had insisted on the location, saying she felt safer surrounded by the innocent laughter of children at play. Rebecca was younger than Maya had expected, maybe 25, with dark hair and eyes that held the kind of pain that comes from witnessing unspeakable things. She sat on a bench, watching the children play, tears streaming down her face. "I see their faces every night," Rebecca began. "The children who came through the foundation. They were so hopeful at first, believing they were going to find families who would love them. But I saw what really happened to them." Rebecca's testimony was devastating. She described a systematic process of breaking down children's identities, erasing their histories, and preparing them for buyers who saw them as commodities rather than human beings. She had documentation of the process, including photos and medical records that showed evidence of psychological conditioning. Dr. Blackwood called it, quote, "preparation." Rebecca said, her voice barely above a whisper. But it was torture. They would isolate the children, tell them their families had abandoned them, convince them that compliance was their only path to survival. But Rebecca had saved more than just documentation. She had maintained secret contact with some of the children who had been placed through the foundation. 3 of them, now teenagers, were willing to testify about their experiences. "One of them is Sofia Valdez," Rebecca said, looking directly at Patricia. "Your daughter is alive, and she's been trying to find her way back to you for 3 years." Patricia collapsed to her knees on the playground gravel, sobbing with relief and rage. Maya knelt beside her, feeling the weight of responsibility settle even more heavily on her shoulders. They weren't just exposing a story anymore. They were orchestrating a rescue mission. But as they prepared to leave the park, Maya noticed a black SUV parked across the street, the same type of vehicle she had seen at the Cascade Foundation. Her heart rate spiked as she realized they had been followed. "Rebecca, Patricia, we need to go. Now." They moved quickly toward Marcus's car, but the SUV's doors opened, and 3 men emerged. Maya recognized one of them as the man who had been knocking on her apartment door that morning. "Ms. Martinez," the man called out, "we need to speak with you." Rebecca froze, terror evident in her every muscle. "They found me," she whispered. "Maya, you have to get the evidence to safety. Promise me you won't let this story die." But Maya wasn't about to abandon Rebecca or Patricia. "We stay together," she said firmly. "Marcus, call 911. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the man said, approaching them with his hands visible but his posture threatening. "Miss Chen, you've caused quite a bit of trouble for some very important people. It's time to have a reasonable conversation about how to resolve this situation." Maya positioned herself between the man and the others, her journalist's instincts warring with her survival instincts. "There's nothing to resolve. The truth is going to come out, whether you intimidate us or not." The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Miss Chen, you seem to misunderstand your situation. The evidence you think you have has been discredited. Detective Morrison's testimony is inadmissible due to her accident. Ms. Torres has recanted her previous statements. Even Mr. Walsh has decided to relocate to another state for his own safety." Each revelation hit Maya like a physical blow. They were dismantling her investigation piece by piece, eliminating witnesses and discrediting evidence. But then she realized something that gave her hope. "You're scared," Maya said, her voice growing stronger. "If you weren't scared, you wouldn't be here trying to intimidate us. You would have just made us disappear like you tried to do with Detective Morrison." The man's composure cracked slightly. "Miss Chen, you don't understand the forces you're dealing with. This operation has protection at the highest levels of government. No newspaper story is going to bring it down." But Maya had spent the morning preparing for exactly this moment. Before leaving for the hospital, she had sent encrypted copies of all her evidence to journalists in 5 different countries, along with instructions to publish everything if she didn't check in every 12 hours. "Actually," Maya said, pulling out her phone, "that story is already being written. By tomorrow morning, the truth about the Cascade Foundation will be on the front page of newspapers in London, Toronto, Sydney, Berlin, and Mexico City. You can intimidate American journalists and corrupt American officials, but you can't control the entire world's press." The man's face went pale as he realized the implications. International exposure would bring pressure from foreign governments, human rights organizations, and law enforcement agencies beyond the reach of Blackwood's influence. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maya held up her phone, showing him the confirmation messages from international news outlets. "Check tomorrow's headlines." For a long moment, the man stared at Maya, clearly calculating his options. Then he stepped back, speaking quietly into a radio transmitter. "Stand down," he said finally. "The situation has changed." As the men retreated to their SUV, Maya felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had won this battle. But the war was far from over. Patricia grabbed Maya's arm. "What happens now?" "Now we make sure Sophia and the other children get home safely," Maya replied. "Rebecca, I need you to contact those teenagers who are willing to testify. We're going to need their stories to make sure Dr. Blackwood and his associates face justice. That evening, Maya sat in the Tribune's conference room with David, Marcus, and a team of lawyers, preparing for the legal and media storm that was about to break. The international stories would publish in 6 hours, and they needed to be ready for the backlash. But as Maya reviewed her notes one final time, her phone rang with a call that would test everything she believed about justice and redemption. The caller was Dr. Richard Blackwood himself. "Ms. Chen," his voice was calm, almost pleasant, "I believe we should meet. There are things about this situation that you don't understand, and I'd like the opportunity to explain my side of the story." Maya signaled to Marcus to start recording the call. "Dr. Blackwood, anything you want to say can be said through your lawyer." "I'm afraid it's not that simple," Blackwood replied. "You see, this isn't just about me or even the Cascade Foundation. The operation you've stumbled onto serves a much larger purpose, one that protects national security interests. If you publish your story, you'll be compromising ongoing federal investigations." Maya felt a chill as she realized what Blackwood was suggesting. "Are you claiming this is some kind of government operation?" "I'm claiming that things are not what they appear to be. Some of the children who come through our program are not orphans or foster children. They're the sons and daughters of dangerous people, terrorists, cartel leaders, foreign agents. We place them in protective custody with families who can keep them safe while their parents are neutralized." The explanation was so unexpected that Maya found herself momentarily speechless. Could it be possible that she had misunderstood the entire situation? But then she remembered Rebecca's testimony, Patricia's pain, and the evidence of financial corruption that suggested personal profit rather than national security. "Dr. Blackwood, even if what you're saying were true, it wouldn't justify the methods I've documented. Children have been traumatized, families destroyed, and laws broken. There's no national security interest that justifies child trafficking." Blackwood's pleasant tone disappeared. "Ms. Chen, you're making a grave mistake. The forces protecting this operation reach far beyond what you can imagine. If you publish your story, you'll find yourself facing charges of espionage, treason, and endangering national security. Your career will be over, and you'll spend the rest of your life in federal prison." Maya looked around the conference room at the faces of her colleagues and friends. David nodded encouragingly. Marcus gave her a thumbs up. The lawyers looked nervous but determined. "Dr. Blackwood," Maya said, "I became a journalist to expose the truth, regardless of who it might embarrass or inconvenience. If you're telling the truth about national security, then prove it. Show me the federal authorization. Show me the oversight documentation. Show me one shred of evidence that this operation is anything other than a criminal enterprise." Blackwood was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of resignation. "Ms. Chen, you've made your choice. I hope you're prepared to live with the consequences." The line went dead. Maya looked at her watch. 4 hours until the international stories published. 4 hours to make sure they had everything right, because after tonight, there would be no going back. As dawn broke over Portland the next morning, Maya's phone exploded with calls from news outlets around the world. The story had broken simultaneously in 12 countries, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. The headlines were devastating for Dr. Blackwood and the Cascade Foundation. International child trafficking ring exposed in Portland. Missing foster children found in illegal adoption scheme. Government officials implicated in human trafficking scandal. But the most important call came from Patricia Valdez, her voice shaking with emotion. "Maya, they found her. The FBI found Sophia. She's alive, and she's coming home." Maya felt tears streaming down her face as the full impact of their work hit her. Sophia Valdez was just one child, but she represented hope for all the others who had been lost in Blackwood's system. Over the next few days, the story continued to unfold. Federal agents arrested Dr. Blackwood and 17 associates, including the corrupt officials who had protected the operation. Rebecca Martinez's testimony, combined with evidence from the international investigation, led to charges of human trafficking, fraud, and conspiracy. But perhaps most importantly, 12 children were located and reunited with their families, while arrangements were made to provide support and counseling for the dozens of others who had been affected by the trafficking ring. A week after the story broke, Maya stood in the Tribune newsroom, looking out at the city she had devoted her career to protecting. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Detective Linda Morrison, who was recovering well from her, quote, accident. Maya, thank you for not walking away. Thank you for seeing this through when the rest of us were too scared. Those children owe their freedom to your courage. But Maya knew the truth was more complicated than that. Yes, she had refused to walk away when the pressure mounted. Yes, she had risked everything to expose the truth. But she hadn't done it alone. Patricia Valdez had provided the moral clarity that kept Maya focused on what really mattered. Rebecca Martinez had found the courage to speak truth to power despite the personal cost. Linda Morrison had preserved crucial evidence even when it put her career at risk. Tom Walsh had maintained his integrity despite losing everything. David and Marcus had provided professional support when others might have backed down. The story succeeded not because of one person's heroism, but because a group of ordinary people had refused to let extraordinary evil triumph through their silence. 3 months later, Maya received an invitation that brought tears to her eyes. Sofia Valdez was graduating from high school, 3 years late, but with honors. Patricia had asked Maya to attend the ceremony as a guest of honor. Standing in the auditorium, watching Sofia walk across the stage to receive her diploma, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. It had started with a desperate grab at her shirt, a plea not to walk away from the truth. It had nearly cost Maya her career, her safety, and possibly her life. But it had also resulted in justice for the victims, accountability for the perpetrators, and most importantly, hope for the future. As Sofia accepted her diploma and searched the crowd for her mother's face, Maya realized that this was why she had become a journalist. Not for the awards or recognition, but for moments like this, when the truth, no matter how difficult to uncover or dangerous to reveal, set people free. After the ceremony, Sofia approached Maya with tears in her eyes. Miss Chen, I don't know how to thank you for giving me my life back. Maya hugged the young woman, feeling the strength and resilience that had carried Sofia through 3 years of unimaginable hardship. Sofia, you saved yourself. I just helped people hear your story. But Sofia shook her head. No, you did more than that. When everyone else was willing to look the other way, you refused to walk away. You showed me that some people still believe truth matters more than comfort. Justice matters more than safety. As Maya drove home that evening, she thought about all the stories still waiting to be told, all the truths still waiting to be uncovered, all the people still waiting for someone to refuse to walk away from their struggles. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Miss Chen, I have information about corruption in the city planning department. Can we meet? Lives depend on it. Maya smiled as she pulled over to respond to the message. Some journalists chased fame and fortune. Others chased comfort and security. But Maya Chen chased the truth, no matter where it led or what it cost. Because she had learned that the most important stories often began with someone grabbing your shirt and saying, "Don't you dare walk away from this." And Maya Chen never walked away. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.